want to talk about the books that made the biggest impression on me throughout the year. And that doesn't necessarily mean they were the most enjoyable, but I think they're the books with deeper themes and ones that I want to return to in the future. I'm going to go in the order in which I read them, which means Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro was the first book that has been on my mind throughout the year. While initially my main critique about this book was that I wanted the world to be a little more fleshed out, having thought about it now over the course of the year, I think that lack of fleshing out makes for more pondering. This is the story of Clara. She's an AI. Her and many like her have been built to become companions to children. This story really just explores the depth of Clara's feelings and, how people kind of take advantage of her, and raises the question of who is more human? AI, humans, where do we draw the line in terms of humanity? Kazuo Ishiguro is just one of those writers that keep me thinking about his books for a long time to come, even the ones I haven't enjoyed as much. This is probably my second favorite Ishiguro. In February, I did poetry and short story, and The Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri has been the book that has stuck with me. It's interesting because I don't necessarily think a specific story from this collection has jumped out at me, but it was mainly her writing and her ability to get beneath the surface of human emotions and really delve into the complicated relationships we have with each other. I also really think this story is one that speaks to not only the immigrant experience, but just feeling foreign in the place where you're living, whether, that's just because it's not a good fit for you or the people around you aren't communal. She just really has a lovely voice, and I'm so excited to get to read more of her short stories, which is saying something because I don't typically enjoy short stories. Next up, we have The Red Tent by Anita Diamant, which is funny because I wouldn't say this was necessarily my favorite book during my month of historical fiction. But what I really enjoyed about this, and the trend I kept seeing throughout my reading experience, is that I love books that turn the lens on a well-known story. This is the retelling of Jacob's family from the Bible. It specifically focuses on Dinah and her story because all we know in the Bible is that she is taken from her family's camp, assaulted, and then her brother's uncle's father all go and kill her assaulter. Now, in the Bible, the focus is on her shame. She is ultimately shunned because of this, even though, it is not her fault. And what Diamant does so beautifully in this is she not only gives Dinah license over her life, her own autonomy, but she tells the story of all the other women and their importance. They are the thing that holds everything together, and their bonds and their deep relationships are just shown so beautifully in this book. It really shows the importance of women that is severely lacking in the Old Testament. For my literary month in June, we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I feel like I need not have to say much to you guys since I know this is a TikTok darling. However, I would go so far to say I think this book sticks with me in a different way than it does for most people, because I was not necessarily enamored with the plot or the mystery or any of that. What I was enamored by was Donna Tartt's ability to set the tone, her writing style. It is just so captivating. When I tell you I breezed through the first 220 pages of this book, I mean it. It took me no time at all. I was sucked in. I was just so enamored by her ability to really place me in setting and cultivate the deep aura of her story. I really didn't like the second half of this book as much as the first half, but that first half will always hold a really deep place in my heart. And for my jumbled mess of a month, which was mystery, thriller, horror, we have Tender as a Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica, and I'm probably going to upgrade this book to a 5-star. This book sits at the top of this list as being the one that has been on my mind the most since reading. Unfortunately, Bazterrica just hit so many of the things that we are struggling with as a society in terms of lack of compassion and empathy, in terms of misogyny, in terms of animal welfare, in terms of government control. Her writing is just so clinical in this. And I typically don't like that writing style, but it works so well. And I think that is part of why I keep returning to it in my mind, because it is so detached in emotions that it forces my emotions to kind of explore, how I would feel if I was stuck in this sort of dystopian world. I really think this is going to be a classic in the coming years. Please, please read it. Funnily enough, for the genre mess that was thriller, mystery, and horror, I have a second book coming out of that, which again, this is not usually my genre. That's The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, and I knew this book was going to stick with me the moment I finished. Honestly, never been more tempted to start a book again from the beginning once closing the book. Now, this thing is a behemoth, so I didn't, but I am really looking forward to the day when I choose to reread it again, because I think so many things will be revealed to me upon second reading. And usually I don't like that gimmick when authors are like, oh, well, you have to read my book a second time to really get it, because that just feels kind of cheap. But Eleanor Kenton did so much work with astrology in this book that my mind was blown. Sure, there are layers and layers of character development that I miss because I am not well versed in astrology, but I hope upon rereading that is more clear to me. Side note, do not watch the TV show. It is bad. Next up, we have The Deep by River Solomon. This is the story of what happened to all the slaves that were dumped off of slave boats and what happens if they became mer people. First off, absolutely fascinating premise, but what River Solomon does best is the emotionality that these mer people have to work through. Because the memories of generational trauma are so scarring, Yetu, who is the main character in this book, is the memory holder. Much like Asher in The Giver, Yetu is the single vessel that holds on to the pain, and once a year they lead their people through the remembrance of that pain. But because they are this vessel, it is draining their life force. And so Yetu chooses to run away. And there's all of these questions of, what do you owe to your community? What does your community owe to you? For my classics month, we have The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. This is just so full of emotions. This book just spoke to my heart in so many ways. There's so much pain in the writing. There's so much longing and angst and desire to be seen and understood by others. This is the story of Stephen, who starts off as a 6-year-old girl who just feels completely out of place. She does not want to engage in girl activities. She wants to ride astride on her horse. She wants to go hunting. She doesn't want to go to tea with the other girls or get dressed in dresses. While her father accepts her for who she is, her mother is always cold and always distant and resentful. And as Stephen gets older, she realizes she's attracted to women, and this was the first openly lesbian novel. I will say I do think the first half of this book is so strong, and the second half is less effective, but still, please do yourself a favor and pick up this book. I'm not quite sure if December Reads counts for this because I haven't had that much time to think about it, but I have to choose The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin. This was written in the 1970s and it is sadly so relevant to today. This talks about, the human abuse of resources and going out and colonizing other planets and disturbing not only the flora there, but also the different human creatures that they encounter. The Athsheans are a very peaceful society, and yet when humans come in and start destroying their environment, they have no choice but to adapt human violence for their own. And this asks questions of can we go back after experiencing that level of volatility? There's so much to say on the hubris of man and just how we don't give any regard to anything that doesn't directly benefit us. And lastly, we have Beyond Power by Marilyn French. I know I just talked about this in a TikTok, but I felt like I wasn't able to give it its due diligence. If you are at all interested in reading deeper into feminism and the ill effects of the patriarchy, please check out this book. This covers everything from physical aesthetics. Why do men typically like thin women? Why do women like typically tall men? Hint, it's all about power and domination. It also covers why did women fight so hard for prohibition? Why are women always so connected to nature? Is it because men always want to assert their dominance over nature? It talks about how nunneries were so important throughout history. It was one of the only places women could have agency. And nunneries are so communal, whereas monks are more isolated. And that really shows the true difference between matriarchies and patriarchies.